Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we do have Aaron back for another interview. Now, Aaron is my gameplay man, so we're going to get into gameplay stuff here. We're going to try and, like the notes that I've got, we'll see where we end up heading. We're going to talk about the game modes inside the game, ranked PvP match flow, affinity and class bonuses. We'll go a bit over the open world again. And then I want to get into some things like burning mechanics and the beta, and what your plans for the beta are. So, Aaron, welcome back, mate. Tell us a little bit, where are you at the moment? Bit of a change of scenery.
Thanks for having me. I've moved into the Northern Hemisphere for about 5 to 6 weeks just to see some family. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. They're ironically not with me. They're off outside at the moment. So I've got plenty of time to spend with you. But it's a nice change of scenery from the extreme heat of Australia. Although at the moment, I think Australia is fairly mild. So
Yeah,
it's a difference.
it was
It's
only
a change.
38 today down here in Melbourne.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, nice
Oh,
day.
wow.
But
Yeah, I said that it was going to get hot the second that we left. It was raining nearly every day,
yeah,
and where I am, it was snowing every day, and we wanted to be in snow. And I said, what'll happen is I'll get on that plane, and the next day it'll be beautiful weather, and then when we get in, it will just be like mushy, and all of the snow will melt, and all of the snow is melting.
getting wrecked. That's awesome.
Yeah,
So the first thing I wanted to go through are the game modes. Now,
sure.
we know we've got the ranked PvP, which is the game mode. We'll dive deeper into the gameplay flow of that one.
Hmm. Hmm.
What are the other PvP modes, and then we'll get into the PvE modes. So because we know the
So
Leviathan Arena, but I want to get into the specifics of how the Leviathan Arena will work, because I don't think it's going to be just a it's not just going to be like a betting system, is it? It's going to have its own ladder and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. So there's 4 game modes that we have planned. The exact mechanics of every single game mode are still up for grabs because we need to do testing. We've done testing internally on what we think will be a good mode, but because we're some sort of a hybrid between the deck building card games and auto battlers, it's not something that there's a whole bunch of games out there that we can just pull from. So we have to come up with something that we think is right. The main thing that we're trying to get towards with most of our modes is the idea of 1 versus 1 and the ability to be a bit more reactive and countering of your opponent rather than some of the auto battlers that have 4 or even 8 players in them.
Yeah.
And in those, it becomes a little bit more about building a team, and there's random card grabbing elements. You have a deck that everyone shares, stuff like that. We don't have that because we're more of a sort of a card game at heart when it comes to the strategy. We need to sort of go more that way, but then you get a little bit more of an opportunity to do fun things with an auto battler than you do with just a card game. So it's a little bit less turn-based. So there's 4 game modes. 2 of them are PvE, 2 of them are PvP. The PvE game modes, the first one, we just call it encounter mode, and it's something that happens in the overworlds. We probably get into that later because I think I need to clarify a little bit about the way that the encounters are going to be
Yep.
spawned both now and in the future. So there's that mode, and all that is just there's a bunch of characters that you're up against, and you've got to choose from your set that you have how to beat them, right? And it's the way that you actually collect the shards in our game.
Yep.
So that's the first one that sort of, you don't have to do it. You could always just buy off of the Illuvidex, but I guess that would be considered like the backbone of the whole system.
Yeah, so that's the one
Then,
where you go traveling, you have an encounter, you got to capture them, you see them,
yeah,
you just place your deck and away you go. That's probably the simplest form of combat in the game.
yeah, it's a 1 round system. Either you win the battle or you don't. If
Yep.
you win, you get an opportunity to capture as many of the Illuvials that you came up against in that battle. Obviously, the longer you try to take to capture them, the more difficult they are, the more chance they have of breaking free
Yep.
and getting out of the encounter. So you've got to be a little bit strategic about what you try to capture. If you've only got tier 1 shards and you somehow managed to win an encounter that has something that is tier 5 and something that is tier 1, you've got to make that choice. If you try to capture the tier 5, it's probably going to fail. Just mathematically, it's probably going to fail. And then maybe the tier 1 escapes because the encounter eventually will break.
Yep.
And you're then kicked back out into the region that you were in. I won't go into the story element of what it means to be kicked out, but you'll have to wait till the game comes out to see that. But effectively, the encounter ends, and you might come out of it empty-handed.
Yep.
So instead of that, you might want to get the tier 1 Illuvial and have that as a bit more of a sure thing.
Yep.
And then give yourself a shot at the tier 5, but who knows? But that's the first.
Just a good old gamble. Mode. Everyone loves a bit of a gamble in games.
It's the same sort of mechanics that you'll find in Pokemon where you're throwing a Pokeball at something. Yep. The only difference is with them, you have just one Pokeball, one thing that you're trying to collect.
Yep.
Here, it's just got a little bit more strategy because there's an array of characters that you've just defeated, anywhere from 1 to about 8. We're not sure about our maximum number of Illuvials that we'll be able to have in a battle, but we're sort of thinking 8 is probably the way to go.
Yeah,
it's maybe not quite as many as some other games, but every auto battler in existence, at least that I could see, that is in this style of PvP is units that are all of the same size, whereas we have any size units, which is it's a lot more complex, put it that way. We've had to do a lot to get the movement of the game just right. It's a lot easier. I was actually playing a game of Teamfight Tactics the other day and watching the movement of the character, and it's all over the place because they have such sort of discrete chunks, you know, that
they're bound to the grid,
and they zigzag really zigzaggy. And it's fine in those games because our graphics are just a little bit higher fidelity. It's one of those things where it's like almost an uncanny valley where you just expect it to be a perfect movement of a character, and we're doing everything we can to get it to be a perfect movement, but there's going to be some little tiny intricacies of the way that it moves, and we've just got to try and make it as good as we can. But I would say we have to spend 5 times more programming time getting ours right, just purely because we don't have units of all the same size. Ranges are a bit tricky. We're even trying to look at ways of having melee characters that have a very long range, because melee doesn't mean you have to be next to them. Melee just means that there's no projectile that comes out from it. So for example, Ramfire, we've been testing this week, its ability to actually attack from behind a front line of smaller units. So its big wing comes all the way over the top of them. And at first I thought this is going to be terrible, but as we've started testing it, it actually looks pretty sick. So we might be able to
something like that. Would that be the kind of thing that's like I feel like that would take a lot of work, because you'd have to program it so that this Ramfire can only attack like this if the units in front of him are of this size? Or would it just be, doesn't matter who's in front of him? Well,
this is the beauty about having systems that are built up from the ground to be both simple and complex when put together, is we have front-loaded a hell of a lot of tech into what we're building. And I'm glad that people are patient with us, but really one of the things that has meant some of the delays is that we're building something that's very, very complex, but also building it so that we can extend it later on a lot more easily. So for example, for us to do that with a character like Ramfire is literally just to extend the range just with a number, right? So we tested that by changing a number. I think he was 6. We changed him to 12, and he does it instantly, right? And it looks good, right? So there's a lot of things that we're building into the game that should allow us to tweak. I wrote out the core tenets of our game on the very first day that I decided to do it. And the first tenet was a thing called simplexity, which is the idea of emergent systems. Very simple, but when you put them together, they build these complex organisms around. And so all of our game has been built that way when it comes to the auto battler. The overworld is a little bit more simplistic. It's a much more standard fare. You have movement mechanics, you have jumping, you have all these sort of things, and it doesn't sort of like interweave so much, but the combat engine is vastly complex in each of its individual simplicities.
Yep.
So we can do a lot of cool testing like that. Another thing that we looked at is with our auto attack system. Usually in most of these games, when you do an auto attack, it just sends a thing of damage and it just minuses some health off there. There could be some armor or calculations built into that. Ours is really like, it's a lot more complicated when you actually get down to it. We send packages through a delivery system that has a very modular framework. So for example, the Ramfire's attack sequences, which you guys have seen, sort of like he does like these big sweeping attacks. We can set it up so that his basic attacks hit everything in front of him, because the attack abilities, which are what we call our basic attacks, they are effectively Omega abilities too. They're all using that same underlying system. So we can make him sweep them all and have him knock them back if we really wanted to. That'd probably be vastly too overpowered, but we get a lot of opportunity to do this. And at the moment, the goal is to finalize all of the core systems. I said in my last dev blog that there's one core system that won't be in for the first beta, and that is the enhancement systems, which is effectively our way of like equipping an Illuvial.
Yep.
But it doesn't make sense with an Illuvial to put a jacket on it or put a belt on it or whatever, at least not till the dating simulator. But before then, it'll be a different way. These enhancements, they're effectively like this energy that you use to infuse them and make them more powerful in particular ways. And that's actually a pretty cool system that we've included, but it's just taking a little bit of extra time to get it exactly right because of the way that we want to do it.
Just to jump in on that a little bit more. So is that going to be effectively in other games what's known as like a gearing system, where it's like it happens outside of combat? Or is that going to be how we spoke about, I think we spoke about last time about item placements? You know how we've got that you'll have like an item placement. Are they the items or is that a separate thing?
They're items.
They're the items.
No, they're
items.
items.
Okay, yep.
They're the items, yeah. But instead of the item being the belt of unforgivingness or whatever, we just have these sort of ephemeral things that are just you can just think of them as a ball of energy, but effectively it's just like an upgrade. You put it onto the character and it upgrades them. And we've tried to make it a little bit different to most games. A lot of these games, these items, they give a lot of stats, and I'm very anti giving extra stats to a character, just purely because the second that you give a character stats, you're telling your audience these stats are more effective on these creatures.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever the combat unit is that you have in your game with stats, if there's armor, then putting health onto an item makes it better to go towards characters that enhance armor, because it gives you more effective health.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is it means that the second you do that, there's this one subset which that item is better on. And you either say, okay, well, this item is only ever going to be used on these ones, or when someone uses it on the other ones, they've effectively made an objective mistake.
Yeah.
Or you strip all of that away and you give functionality.
Yeah.
And that's what we've decided to do with ours. We've effectively got these like passive events that happen, like, for example, fainting, right? Going down to 0 health or going down to, let's say, 20% health. So if you want your character to last longer, we have enhancements that allow you, once you get down to a low amount of health, to trigger a massive health increase that first time it happens, or you become invulnerable for a certain amount of time. And why I think that is a little bit of a better design is because it means that when you put that onto your tanky frontline units, they can hold the line for a lot longer. And if you put it onto your backline units, they can't be spiked down as quick. So both of those things can use it and get utility out of it.
And just from a gameplay perspective, it's more fun to have those type of mechanics added instead of just raw stats. There's no excitement just adding stats. Whereas when you got gameplay mechanics that you can change with that kind of stuff, that's when I find it more enjoyable, definitely. But yeah, the other game modes, what was the other PvE one? I believe that's what's going to be in the first closed beta.
Yeah, so the first mode that people will get access to, I think we've started to leak what that arena looks like. That will be what we call survival mode.
Yep.
And I actually leaked into chat maybe last week, or maybe I didn't leak it into chat. Maybe I just leaked it to some people, or maybe it was just internal. But the soundtrack for that one, which is sounding
we had some audio
very,
there. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
very cool.
That's the one with Gordy, the big drone.
Yeah, Gaudi. Yeah,
Gaudi.
So the Gaudi bots are the builder drones of this world, or at least of this race of people. So they have access to these things called polymorphic companion drones. And the polymorphic part is that they can change configurations if you have access to it. So Mozart is a configuration. Gaudi is a configuration, and we've sort of named them off some famous people just because we think that that's quite fun. And these are the scouting and building bots. So if you look very, very closely in our trailer, you'll see these tiny, tiny little streams that come off the ship as it's crashing, and those go to all of the areas of the world, right? All of the areas of this vast continent that the player will get to play on, which encompasses all of our regions. And when you see the actual game mode and you see how big Gaudi is, it puts into perspective the size of this ship. Right,
Yeah.
the ship is very, very massive because these things are tiny. But when you look up as a player inside of this arena, it's gargantuan. You know, it's I don't know, maybe 20 meters tall or something like that. So there's a lot of scale to what we're doing with the game. I wish that we had the time to make the worlds be like hundreds of kilometers squared and stuff like that. And eventually we will. Once we upgrade to Unreal Engine 5, I think that'll give us a little bit more freedom to do what it is that we are really good at, which is to dress out a beautiful world rather than going through all of the little crossing your T's and dotting your I's of getting the polygon count down low enough that people can play it and stuff like that. Unreal Engine 5 does a good job of that, but we can't move to that until it's ready for production. That should be sometime next year. So, but apart from that, we do have the opportunity later on to have a larger scale. And I think that what we may do is build out the regions, and obviously it would be a little bit of a retcon. We've got these domes that cover the region, and at the moment we're looking at sort of like 2 to 3 sort of kilometers wide. So you're talking about sort of like 4 to 9 square kilometers in area. Eventually that will expand out, but we're talking maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. For now, we're happy with the size of those regions in terms of the time it takes you to do things, and the fact that it's a much more instance nature in the first launch of the game that we do. So we're fine with the size of it at the moment, but it will expand out. But that game mode, survival, is what people will see. And the idea behind that game mode is it's actually there's a tiny little bit of a lore leak here. It may not be the same time as what you land, right? Like we might be showing you something that's a little bit into the future. I'm not talking time travel or anything, no nonsense like that. But this is after the world has been sort of set up a little bit and built out. This building was not on the planet before you crashed, right? This is the Verlaine making it. So it's just a little bit into the future. And the idea is that they're used to train. And so it can spawn sort of like fake Illuvials
Yep.
that you would battle against to learn how to become a better ranger.
Almost sort of
And
like hologram training type stuff, like that sort of concept.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z. That's
Yeah.
the chamber, the gravity chamber.
Yeah.
So it's basically just a way to get you really really strong. And because remember, you as the ranger, you go in and you fight, right? And you have to upgrade your equipment and stuff like that. So you do have a progression
Yep.
in terms of how many characters that you can control, how much power you have as the ranger, all that sort of stuff. So in that game mode, the story behind it is that Gaudi has malfunctioned and he's just sending you wave after wave after wave. And as you fight, the amount of alluvials that you can place goes up because your turn points goes up, but Gaudi starts putting them at you faster and faster and faster to the point where you're up against incredibly strong ones across the board, and at some point you'll lose.
Yeah.
And the whole idea behind it is very similar to survival mode in a lot of the chess websites. You just got to keep going and trying to solve each and every wave until eventually you can't solve it anymore. Whatever that number is, that's your high score.
Yeah, nice. And now, because obviously we have PvP modes as well, is there going to be like a seasoned ladder for that type of thing, or is it going to be just one ladder that stays there the whole time without reward incentive? Or have you had any thoughts on that side of things for the PvE modes?
For the PvE, there will probably not be rankings, so to speak.
Sorry,
They'll just be rewards.
Yeah, so there won't be. Oh, so it'll be like a progression thing for your personal rewards, but as for like, will there be like one that says this guy got like 57 waves in, and he sits on the top
Oh
of the
yeah,
ladder?
yeah. Yeah, there'll be a leaderboard, but there
Yeah,
won't be like a ongoing ranking system. There's
yeah,
just a daily. You'll see the daily high score. You'll see the weekly high score, and probably the month and the yearly high score.
yeah.
But this mode, we are intending to be one of the ways where people can earn their in-game yield, right?
Okay.
So this will be because we want people to be able to earn it through PvE and also through PvP. But one of the tricky things with PvE is if you get bots that go in there, and if all it is that you need to do a reward to capture something or to travel to a region, or these basic things that
Yeah.
anybody can do, you'll just get a whole bunch of bots doing it. And to be fair, we could probably get away with it because there's a bit of a payment method to go into the regions, but it seemed a bit boring.
Yep.
So by doing it this way, we're allowing people to use their brains to get to the top of this leaderboard, and that will be one of the ways that people will be able to earn their in-game yield.
And you can scale the rewards easily and filter out like the
Easily.
lowest scores so that you don't run into those problems if you have to as well. So that's not too bad either.
Yeah, the from the very beginning, the idea has been that concurrently with the external yield farming, we have the in-game yield that should be emitting at the exact same rate. But because the game is delayed, there is a pool of yield that is building up
Yeah.
pre-launch, which needs to then be pushed out in a fairly large wave, right? So there'll be a
Yeah.
lot of rewards at the very beginning to sort of catch up, so to speak.
Yep. And with that, this is just digging in a bit deeper into the rewards thing. How do you plan on actually giving out the rewards? Like, what are you going to base your reward structure off of? Like, would it be like tokens, or would it be a dollar value in the token? If you know what I mean. For
Tokens.
So like you're gonna have a set token amount. If the token goes up 5x, it's just that's the amount of tokens. You won't adjust it for that sort of stuff.
Nope. It'll be now inside of that. There could be internal adjustments between each of the individual mechanisms by which we give people the tokens.
Yep.
So it could be that after 4 months, we say, whoa, we're giving away a lot in this area, but we're finding that a lot of people are doing this thing because they really love it. And maybe we want to switch that over here, or maybe we want to incentivize something that isn't working as much. So the split will change, but we have
total.
1 million tokens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're supposed to give away a certain percentage of that, which scales down by 3% every 2 weeks in the exact same way that
Staking.
the other 3 million yield tokens goes.
Yep.
The only difference between it is that at the moment, the yield is doing its job and everybody's getting it, but the in-game yield is just pooling up, waiting to be used. So, and a large part of that would be the tournament that we would have to kick off the start of competitive play inside of the system, and that's probably going to have a prize pool. It depends on what the token price is at the time, but if we can pull it off, we'd like it to be somewhere between 35 and 50 million US in total value.
Not bad.
Which would make it it would become the number one esports prize pool in history. So
it's definitely good. It's definitely fantastic marketing on top of anything else. That kind of stuff gets people talking.
We have another form of in-game yields that will be, in my opinion, super interesting. And it will be, I can't go into the details yet because we haven't actually announced it. I will say it is something that I came up with, and every once in a while I think is a pretty good idea, but it'd be something that you would be more interested in compared to someone who is a pro player. I know that you're sort of both, but
no, I'm pro. I'm just a sweaty tryhard,
mate. But there's definitely an extra way to game in our system and get yields, which is something that has absolutely never been done in anything before. And it might go terribly pear-shaped and be a horrible thing, and we have to scrap it, but it sounds, internally to me, it sounds bulletproof, and I think that people are going to really like it, and I think it'll bring a lot of people into our game. But we haven't announced it yet. It'll probably get announced maybe January or February, but definitely pre-launch. Beautiful. But that's survival mode in a nutshell. Is you just have these waves of units that are coming at you. Then we have obviously the player versus player modes, and they're very similar. One thing you'll notice about every mode is that it always uses the same underlying combat engine, right? We have one combat engine. It's balanced around ranked, but all of the other modes use it. With the PvP, the real difference is that in our ranked mode, the focus is fairness. There is a little bit of, I guess, pay to win, because just like in anything, like in Magic the Gathering, you can't go and win the world championship if you don't own any cards. Simple as that. And if you only own 10, then
if you've only got the starter deck, you're screwed.
There's just no way around it. And deck is the tier zeros. That gives you access to stage 1s, stage 2s, stage 3s, and it gives you access to every type of affinity, every type of class, and it teaches you all of the different ways to play the game, and you effectively get them for free as long as you're willing to put in a little bit of sweat and go out and capture them. So there is definitely a pay-to-win element of it. We've never shied away from that, but the way that ranked is designed to be is even more fair than something like a Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! In the sense that if you own a particular line, you can play that card as anything in the line, which means that effectively you can build up a deck for 9 times as little money, because you only need to capture the stage 1s. To get a stage 3, you obviously need to go through the process of fusion. So 3 of them makes a stage 2, 3 stage 2s. And that's why it's 9 times as hard. I mean, technically, it would really be 13 times as hard, because then you would also need to go back and get another stage 2, and then also go back and get the stage 1. So it's we're trying to be as fair as we can with people in the PvP.
So the ranked one is it's all normalized. You know, you just need the one. There's none of the extra stat fluctuations, and none of that matters. Levels don't matter. It's to me, it's just a nice competitive format that's as fair as you can be, while you've still got to have something. It's sort of that mid range of, you know, you're not going to walk in, spend nothing, and dominate PvP. You've still got to spend something, but you don't have to spend ridiculous amounts where we get into the
Yeah.
Leviathan arena, obviously, which is now
Hmm.
originally I thought that from what, everything that I'd heard, I thought the Leviathan was arena was just something where you go in, like all stats matter, or your
That's
fusions matter, all that stuff. But I
yep.
thought it was just going to be you had to gamble Ethereum to play in it, but it's actually going to be its own game mode
No.
with a ladder and everything like that, just like the ranked.
Yeah.
However, there will be that gambling thing on the side, which won't be, I don't think that'll be like the heaviest use of it, but that will be something for like the mega whales that go crazy. But at least this gives
Yeah.
a, because before we found out about that, because I've spoken to you and Kieran about it behind the scenes,
Hmm.
um, my concern was there wasn't going to be any real reason aside from the endless waves to actually invest in your Illuvials. Sorry guys, we just lost Aaron for a minute. We're back, but yeah, when I was looking at when we originally thought that the Leviathan arena was just like a gambling type thing, it felt like not many people would get there, and then I wanted an incentive myself to like take my Ramfy to a Ramfire because I like when I play games that attachment that you get to something that want to build it up. On top of that, we have things like, you know, the innate stats that you can get when you get them. I call them IVs from Pokemon, but you've got that
Hmm.
randomized stat value that you can get, which adds value to a good base stat character. So now that I realize that we do have that proper laddering system with, you know, everything available, it, to me, that gives a good incentive for players to, you know, have attachment to their Illuvials and the game, but it also gives a
Yep.
lot more stability to the marketplace, which I was wrapped with, because it means now if you, even if you're going out catching tier ones, say that tier one is now meta this, you know, this season,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you happen to get a perfect base stat one, then
Hmm.
it instantly has more value than
Sure.
the crap ones. Now, this is the other question that I wanted to ask you. With Fusion, those
Yep.
base stats, how do they carry over? Is it like one from each one, or is it three from the first one that you choose, or have you decided that yet?
So the current algorithm is that it'll check each of the stats and randomly pick one from the characters that you have, right?
Ah, yep.
So it's basically a lucky dip for each of the stats that are in there.
And you could get all three stats from one of them, or you could get two from one from another, or one from each of them, or that sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could.
Okay.
It's the same. It's the same way that we do the whether or not it's hollow or it's effectively it's finish.
Yeah.
Every one that you put into that fusion has a 33% chance to be the one that it comes out on the other side. So if you put in three hollows, then you're 100% guaranteed to get a hollow out the other side. If you put in only one hollow, then you'll have a 33% chance of getting it. And if you put no hollows, you can't get a hollow out of it, right?
Yeah.
There's just no
Yeah.
options there. So the thing that I think some people are forgetting is that to progress inside of the game and catch things that are harder, you do need to have harder. You need to have higher level things, right?
Yeah.
Your Ramfy is not going to cut it when it comes to capturing the most difficult things in the game,
Yeah.
right? When you go to battle, you could come up against a team that's all tier fours and tier fives of stage three Illuvials. And a stage one Ramfy, even though he's quite strong, he might not get the job done.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why you do need to keep on fusing them,
Yeah.
because you won't progress through the actual exploration mode
Yeah.
if you don't keep progressing and getting stronger and stronger ones. Now, you can avoid that by just going to the market and buying it, but it still puts a demand
In the
on
market.
being able to get to the to get to the later stages. That's one thing that I think people are forgetting about, is that it does, you can't just have your tier ones, because remember, in encounter mode, we don't do any of the normalization for you.
Yeah.
The encounter mode is effectively identical to Leviathan Arena in terms of combat. It's
Yeah.
just that there's a different mechanic behind how you win. So there's absolutely reasons why you would need to do that. The other thing that people are totally forgetting is that Illuvials are the backbone of Illuvium, right?
Yeah.
Not of the first game. So when we do that second full title and you've got a RAM fee and you're in that dating simulator and you want to get some, like really, really high quality date, you might need RAM Fire to get there, right? Which means that you have to keep pushing and getting higher and higher things. So you could end up playing 4 or 5 different games, and the Illuvials are the thing that underpins all of that in terms of their system.
Yeah.
And by having one that has really good random stats in one game, it means that it most likely will have good random stats in another game.
Yeah.
And the beauty about the system is that we don't even need to know about what those stats are going to be. They could be literally anything. We just have a way of taking the hash value of the character and converting it in a way that reliably tells you pretty good or excellent or perfect.
Yeah.
And so it'll be something where, as time goes on, people will want to keep on upgrading their character, no doubt.
Yeah, and when you touch on like the progression to be able to capture things, you got to keep upgrading and stuff like that. That type of stuff really excites me because I've been playing a few like small crypto games, and the one thing that like I've really loved from them is like they can be the same as a game that you can play free to play on mobile or something like that, but it adds an extra layer to theory crafting of it's not what's the best, it's like what's the best value for what you have to spend. And that is something that I think like people who they're just watching the space and haven't been playing games, like that was the biggest eye opener to me when you get into it. It's like there's this whole extra layer to theory crafting where it's no longer just the best, it's the best value at the time at where the market is and stuff like that. So that's another thing that I'm really excited about. Like, what's the shortest way to go from capturing, maybe one tier 1 and a tier 2 to be able to capture a tier 4, like numbers, it adds that whole layer. So I think that'll be really exciting.
It's definitely more important because effectively you're taking the main currency. Almost every game that exists has a currency, and it's time, right? Yeah. Especially in like RPGs and progression games. Yeah. If you're talking about like an esport type of game, the currency is skill.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to time because you have to practice, right?
Yeah.
The whole point of being able to have full ownership over your own things is that currency gets replaced with currency, right? Which means that you actually now not only have to think, what am I going to do, but also like, where am I going to spend my money? How much am I going to get out of it on this side? Whereas people don't tend to think about that when it's just time. I've played many games. Like I remember I used to play Guild Wars and then Guild Wars 2. And in those games, I would be happy to spend a long time going out there and doing stuff because that's just what it took, right? And we've changed the formula. And I guess all of the pay-to-earn games, it's like, well, you can now spend money and time and skill, and they all sort of get bundled together. And it just changes the way that people think about their games. And it should change the way that the developers create their games.
Yeah, 100%. And the next layer on top of that for me is like, I've always been like a gotcha addict, like whether it be opening packs of cards into mobile games where you do summons and you got these different rates. And what I've noticed from playing, like I said, some other smaller crypto games is that feeling of summoning when it's worth something. And like that RNG you're going into with like, a 1% chance to get something that, might make you a big bag. It's like, it adds that level of excitement that you just don't get anywhere else when there's not the value tied to it. It sounds strange, but it's like, then I look at Illuvium and it's like, it's that processed, but like heavily gamified, which with a lot of risk points where it's like, okay, you've got to actually get the encounter, then you've got to have that thing in the encounter, then you've got to win the encounter, and then you've actually got to win the drop rate of catching it with your shard. So like, that's what, from playing in the space, it's just like, that's what's got me super excited about Illuvium is how gamified the gotcha system is.
Yeah, the main reason for that is we don't like as you've seen, we don't like the idea of someone just coming in and paying and they have the best on day one. Like that's why we refuse to allow people to have useful things in the game
Yeah.
before the start. Where we're trying to go away from that idea of, buy a sword and it'll be the best sword, and you just got people that are just randomly buying stuff hoping that it's going to be good, when we don't feel that that's a healthy way for the whole
Yeah, definitely
market
at the
to
start.
sort of evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not fair on people to say, hey, our game could be terrible, you might hate playing it, but you've got to spend all of this money up front to be able to play the game and to compete with other people. The only thing that we do is we have a governance token that people can buy so that they can have a say in the way that we build it, and it's a completely separate thing.
Yeah.
You can be sitting on the sidelines, you've spent zero on Illuvium, then you go into the game, you spend zero on it because you're using all of the tier zero things and getting used to it and playing it. And at that point, hopefully we've hooked you and then you become part of that system.
Yeah.
But we don't want to force people to just randomly say, okay, I guess I'm going to be part of a system that I don't really know anything
Yeah.
about. It doesn't feel fair. So we've tried to gamify everything. One of the pieces of advice that we got early on was to completely scrap the overworlds and just do it as packs of cards, because we'd always planned it as being very similar to opening a pack of cards. But instead of it just being, I bought it and it's here and these are my things, when you buy it, effectively what that means is traveling to a region. You get
Yeah.
to see all of these cool things in the region, and you get to go and pick the cards that you want to
Yeah.
collect. And at its heart, it's still just a pack of cards, but it's just a bit more of a rich experience.
There's a lot
And
more
we just feel
dopamine
like,
involved in the process.
yeah, we just want people to get hooked, because, like, underpinning all of this is we want to have there be a storyline that we can actually tell. And if all we've got is a battle board, then it's very hard to tell the story around that.
Yeah.
Whereas by having the open world, you can at least see some of the places that will exist in the story. So,
Yeah.
like this weekend, I'm working on the script and some of the dialogue for the videos that we're going to do. And we want people to feel part of this world, even if they are not the people specifically driving the main narrative.
Yeah.
In the same way, like it always has felt artificial to me in a lot of those MMORPGs where everybody can go in and do the quest where the king dies, and it's like, oh no, the king has died, and then 3 minutes later, oh no, the king has died, and it's just a constant
Yeah.
loop, and it just feels a little bit fake. So for us, we're just saying, you're just doing your job, you're just going out there as a ranger, you're collecting, you're trying to get stronger, you're trying to be able to play and move up the ranks and stuff like that. That's all you've got going for you. And then outside of that is, we are trying to build a world that we can tell good stories in. And it allows us to sort of expand the IP so that when we go to make a second game, it has a reason to exist,
Yeah.
and it has some semblance of like follow through from the first game, where you can say, oh yeah, I know about that thing that happened, so now when this happens, yeah, I got it, that makes sense. So that's the general idea behind it.
100%. Well, I think we just got through the game modes. We've had a good sidetrack there. A lot of good
Yeah.
nuggets in there. But we've basically got the just a recap on game modes. You got the basic PvE where you're capturing the Illuvials. You got the endless waves, and then in PvP you have two separate types, which we'll go through
Yep.
the flow summary in a second. One being normalized stats, and one being everything counts, and you can get that
Yep.
edge by having the better units. But the next thing that I wanted to move into was going to be this one here. I'm just popping it up on screen now, which is like the PvP flow. So I just wanted to go into this. So we have the deck building. This first bit's really self-explanatory. If you don't have a deck built basically that complies, you can't get in. But you find a match, and then once you find a match, you get an opponent, and you get to see their deck that they're bringing into combat. Now, like you said, we're not going to have the items at the start of the game, so the item section won't be.
Oh no, you'll have enhancements by the time we have PvP.
Oh, okay.
You just won't
Sick.
have You just won't have enhancements for the survival mode,
Ah, okay, that's
and
all right then.
survival mode becomes a little bit more nuanced and a little bit better
Okay.
with enhancements. So the people who play that are getting a slightly cut down version, but we're hoping that by the end of that first closed beta that we will have the enhancements there so that we can test them out in that mode.
Yep.
So but it's I don't think that we can do PvP without enhancements.
Yeah, it's sort
It's
of
too
a
integral to the system.
yeah. So then we have
Yeah.
the legendary enhancement built the bidding. How is that system going to work?
So you get an enhancement that is something that's quite powerful, and we're still deciding how many of the cards of your opponent you get to see. I had a discussion with Ben yesterday that, in my opinion, I think it should be all of them, because I think once you see all of them, you can start to work out a little bit more about what different strategies your opponent will come up with, and it will influence the way that the legendary enhancement bidding goes, right?
Yeah.
So these legendary ones are things that are quite powerful, and you have to bid a certain amount of your turn points in order to get it.
Yeah.
Now, you can bid to deny, or you can bid to get it for yourself because you think that it'll work
Yeah.
for you. And this is like one of those little bits of input randomness that we have in the game, is that they'll always be different. And based on your deck, it could be that it really suits what you're thinking of going. But if you then buy it and spend a lot to buy it because you think they'll deny it, and then you just tunnel vision into this, it could be that your opponent has a really clever way of countering you. So
and with
it
that,
adds a lot of game theory.
will it just be a single enhancement that comes up? Like you both see the same single enhancement, then you got to bid on it, or will it be like maybe there's two and you can bid on one, and maybe you want to outbid your opponent on the one he might get instead of, or the that's
it could be two, it could be three.
yeah, still
It's
in the
not
works.
fully, yeah, as in all of these systems are going to take a little bit of time to go through. Getting a game mode that works long term is something that is an iterative process.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we are finalizing the combat engine, right? The combat engine has a lot of the tech in there, but once that's done, getting the game mode is actually, it's a lot quicker than what people would suspect, because you're really just talking about rules and
And then it should
the
come down
user
to testing,
interface.
a lot of testing and getting
Yeah,
feedback,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
User interface does take a bit of time, but if people are okay with it, we can give them a new game mode and have literally just a really, really nuts and bolts user interface for it, so that they can play these different game modes and find out what they like.
Yeah.
You know, they can suggest that you could suggest a game mode for us. The main thing is we have this combat engine, which we think is quite interesting in terms of how the characters sort of interplay. And the game modes, well, they could be anything. We could put out a game mode that does have 8 people that you're up against in a carousel style format. We can do whatever we want, but it's just about, to begin with, we have to try and target what we think is going to be best for our system.
Yeah.
And hope that we're as close to hitting the mark as possible, so that there's a lot less in the way of change that needs to happen.
Yeah, perfect. So we go through, we see each other's decks. We then know who has the legendary enhancement or whatever it is. So you know everything that your opponent has, and they know everything you have. Then we go to the alluvial placement round. That's when you obviously place on the boards. And then you're going to see what everyone's placed on the boards in terms of alluvials. Now, and obviously all this stuff you can change. Like I remember first time we spoke about it was maybe like you have like, I place 2, you place 2, and then like, I actually personally, when I saw this, I was like, I actually like this more because it's less tedious in the gameplay flow. That's the personal way I look at this. It makes it more concise.
The way that we will set it up is going to depend on, I guess, people's attention spans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The placement round section can be any number of different ways that we want to do it.
Yeah.
One thing that we're very certain of is, if we do go sort of a drafting phase where people are sort of picking things and revealing what other people have, is we want it to be really fast, right? I watch a lot of chess, And as much as I can appreciate that classical chess is where, you know, the biggest brain plays get made and it's the most precise, I love speed chess where people have to think instinctively and pick something. And there's a lot of sort of skill involved in that. So if we do go that there's like 2 parts of it or 3 parts of it or however many parts, you're talking 5 to 10 seconds max to play something down. It won't be
Yeah.
you have a minute and then your opponent has a minute. It will be very quick to get to combat and you just play your match.
Yeah, sick. And so once we've got the board reveals, everything's in place, then you can choose your item placements, which is your enhancements, to try and counter what their placements are. Then you've also got to have the mind games of what enhancements are they going to place and where are they going to place it. Are they going to try and counter my offense or bulk their defense and all that sort of stuff, which is cool.
Yep.
Then we have the battle round. And then we go into, did player obelisk lose all of its health? Now, the obelisk is like your life points you talk about. That's what we're going to be gambling with in the legendary enhancement bidding. I just have one question with that. What is the obelisk? Because like to me, obelisks are the big port, you know, the logo, the big statues. Like what is our obelisk? Like what physically, what is it?
So there's no story element behind this. You can just think of it as effectively health. It's just a way for us to sort of tie something into the main game. It's not something where you've got like a little mini obelisk in your pocket.
It's like your little keychain. Because when I thought about the health type system, I thought it was going to be tied into Mozart. Like I thought he was going to be like your life force in the battle, and like that's what gets drained.
No. So Mozart's job is to sort of get you to peace out if required, right? In all of the modes, because we don't want to have a situation where the player can die.
Yep.
Right, where you just lose everything and it's just see you later, go start from scratch. So if you lose, you just get kicked out, and that's basically him sort of carrying your sorry ass back into the real world. So in this, I'm not 100% sure what Ben's thoughts on it are, but the obelisk in survival mode is a physical thing that we had a plan. We've come into some sort of little bits of trouble with getting it to work right, but it was effectively going to be an outwards in survival mode where there's creatures coming from all over the place.
Yeah.
And it sort of hasn't panned out exactly the way that we wanted it to. So it's going to be like a
battle board,
a battle board style. So, but we still might bring that back in one way or another. One way I'm thinking is that maybe we could have it become its own sort of like proper game mode that becomes something bigger, and you have wave after wave of something besides Illuvials that you have to battle, which could be quite cool. But that's for down the road. So there is definitely a way that we can add this in. But the original idea was that you had a small obelisk that was in the center of your board that you were defending. And you had to. So it could be that he's just sort of used the same nomenclature across both of them so that it has a bit of the same feel. I honestly don't know if he's got plans for more of a story element of it, but I'm not aware of it being something that's integral to the movie or anything like that.
And so with the health, that's going to be based off of how much health your Illuvials have lost and stuff like that for that round. And then it's like if no one lost all their health, we go through. And if you get 3 rounds where you just go back to the alluvial placement round. And then if you get through 3 rounds and no one's actually defeated yet, you go back to the legendary enhancement bidding. Now,
there could be an extra round.
If you go back to the legendary enhancement bidding, does your obelisk health stay the same, or does it reset and you go again?
Oh no! It wouldn't. That would become, I think, a little bit too tedious to have like that'd be like a full on draw. But the other thing that we've been discussing recently is just to simplify it a bit by just instead of it being round based, it's just health based, and you can die in the first round if you get absolutely slaughtered. I mean, technically you couldn't, because the amount of damage that would get done to you, we wouldn't allow you to lose in one round. But if one of the issues with having a round-based system is you can sort of you can tank around, right? You can sandbag
Yeah.
in order to put more things on the board and be stronger later. And we want there to be some larger repercussions than having just like an exact amount of damage taken, which is you lost one round.
Yeah.
So if you sandbag
You get
and you
punished.
get hurt really bad, then that makes it a little bit more tricky whether or not you would sandbag. If you can find a way to just lose but store away some of your points so that you can play something bigger later on,
Yep.
it could add to the decision space. So it may be that instead of having, say, a best 3 out of 5 or best 2 out of 3, we just go to straight, we wait until someone runs out of health.
Yep.
And
like maybe on the third round you could have just like, even like to speed things up, if everyone's playing stall, you could have like an enrage timer where after a certain amount of time, you know, you deal more damage and receive less healing, stuff like that. There's all those workarounds. But with the rounds, you can, if you have, say, a Ramfy, you have one Ramfy, you can only play that in one round. Is that correct? Or you can replay things in multiple rounds.
Yeah, you can.
You replay?
You absolutely can. You can absolutely
Okay.
replay. The whole point is that there has to be some sort of inertia to your deck, right?
Yeah.
If you play 6 characters in round 1, you cannot wholesale remove them all. Because if you could, that would mean that you could get your opponent to reveal, and then they would be able to remove all of theirs, and it would just become this giant mess. And instead of it being a strategic game, it would become a little bit more random.
Yeah.
So once you've played your characters, you have to choose what you take out and what you add in. And you certainly don't get the ability to just wholesale remove everything from there.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if you start out with a magma deck and you get wrecked because the other guy has like this cool water, air, you know, sort of combo or something like that, then he's going to try and keep it, you know, or they'll do their best to try and just stay on top of you, and you're going to have to pivot.
Yeah.
But if you pivot like really hard and change a lot of your carry and become something else, and your opponent picks that you've pivoted because they know your deck and they know what your other carries are, there becomes a little bit of mind games, and it becomes actually strategic. So it's going to take the idea that we could just come up with something that the first time people play it is just instantly brilliant is ludicrous. It's going to take some iteration. It's going to take some people such as yourself telling us, hey, I don't like this. I think that this part needs to be snappier. We got to be quicker. And we will go through all of those iterations, and we'll come out of it with a better game in the
Definitely, yeah, and 100%, like you said, it's one of those things you can think of like the best idea in your head, and then you actually play through, and you're like, no, we got to do something different here. No, that's awesome. Yeah, that gameplay, I like the look of that flow of for an initial gameplay, so I'm keen to see how that's going to go and play through. But moving on from that one, I just wanted to talk a little bit about affinities and classes, because we've been getting a lot of leaks on them. Not a hell of a lot I want to dig into, just a couple little things to do with, say, like say for instance, poison. You've got water, you've got nature. Water and nature gives you a poison. How does the points work for that? So if you're a poison alluvial in the team and we're counting up points of how many water points, does the poison count for one water and one nature point in the team?
Yeah, so we're going to have to do a little bit of education of players, because our system is a little bit more complicated than others, where it's just you are a particular thing and that's it. Ours obviously has this hybrid nature. So we've actually been discussing internally this week about whether or not people will feel that it's fair the way that we set things up. Not specifically what you're talking about. I think everyone will get that.
Yeah.
But to do with not being able to get extra stacks from the same line. And so we're going to have very clear terminology with
because that was going to be my
so
next
that people
question.
Understand it.
Yeah, because I was looking through, for instance, when I'm looking at poison, it's like if a poison enemy is nearby, poison alluvials gain energy regeneration per water count, and get healed a percentage of max health per nature count. And then they explode when they die and poison the enemies and stuff like
Yep.
that. But it's like then you have water at base that get energy based on the amount of waters, and like the number maxes where like the poison says 3 energy, water says 3 energy per water, but it's like some of them the effect isn't exactly what that other thing's effect is. So do you get the poison?
Exactly.
Do you get the poison bonuses and the water bonuses and the nature bonuses, or do you just get your poison bonuses? Or
I'll try to explain it. This is something that was a challenge for us when we started with a hybrid system. I knew that there would be a really cool system in there that would give this ability of making emergent gameplay, but we didn't have all of it in detail, and I was very strict on the guys. We are going until we get this right. We're not just going to throw something out there that is half baked. So the way that it works with the ones that have a hybrid synergy is we have a thing called a stack and we have a thing called a synergy threshold. Okay, so a synergy threshold is a number of stacks required to get an effect. So if you have a look, for example, water, if I have 3 stacks of water, then I get the first threshold.
You get 3 energy regen.
Water. Yeah. And if I get to 6 waters,
you get 7
then
energy.
I would get the next threshold up. So I get threshold 2, etc., etc. That I think most people sort of they get. But we need to talk about it in the right language, which is threshold means like bumping up enough that you get a new thing. Right? The stacks are the underlying counts of what we've actually got built into the game. So when you play a poison character, you're actually in your list of synergies, you will see 1 extra count of water, you'll see 1 extra count of nature, and then you'll see 1 extra count of poison. Now, if that puts you from 2 to 3, then everything that is water will gain that bonus, right? And in the case that we're talking about, where you had 2 and now you've got 3, those 2 other characters that are on the board that are water characters, they will now get the bonus of having the first threshold for water, right? When you talk about the actual alluvial that you just placed that's poisoned, sorry, not poisoned, poison, it isn't water. It has both of them as elements, but it doesn't get the water synergy bonus.
But
right?
the way
it adds to it, but it doesn't get it.
But the way you've built it is that you sort of get a similar type of bonus.
Yes,
you sort of get the blend between the two without the full extent of it.
Yeah.
Okay, sick.
And so when you look at what does that poison character get, well, it gets its own separate thing, which is very similar from the water counts on the board, right? You have now 3 stacks of water, so that counts as 3 times whatever your bonus is.
Yeah. So here,
and then on the nature side, maybe you've got 6.
Yeah, so I'm just reading poison. Sorry, I can't pop this one up on screen. I didn't have it prepared. But yeah, poison alluvials gain energy regeneration per water count, and then under that we've got water 3 energy regen. So to me, that means that nature, the requirement is if a poisoned enemy is nearby, they're going to get then 3 energy regen per 1 water count, whereas water just gets the flat 3 energy regen, but to get that, they need 3 water counts in the team. So it's like, it's more of like, this one is more of like an enhanced version of it, but it's conditional. So it's like...
Yeah, it's conditional. Yeah. And the general idea behind, once we started looking into the fact that we had this hybrid synergy system, when you build a character, it would feel a little bit incomplete if the way that it played didn't hinge on how you got it there, right? So you've got this poison, but what is this poison really in the composition of your team? Is it a poison that's in with a lot of water, or is it a poison that's in with a lot of nature? Right. You can't have it be both, because otherwise you'd have too many units on the field. But if you've got a lot of water, then this poison character is going to operate very similarly to the way that other water characters behave, right? And water, the general idea behind water is that it gains energy.
Yep.
Now, how it gains energy is totally different depending on the type of character it is, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
But in the case of this poison one, it's gaining energy because of how many water characters you've got there.
Yep.
Right. Whereas if it's nature, then it's gaining based on the nature characters. So, like, to give a really contrasting view, if you had, say, something that was steam, which is, water and fire, on one side you've got doing damage or at least taking away something from you, and on the other side you've got gaining energy. So if you play a steam character in and amongst a whole bunch of fire characters, it's going to feel more damaging.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to feel more like fire.
Yeah.
Whereas if you play it in a big water team, it's going to feel more like an energy gaining sort of a style of play.
Yeah.
And that was really important to us so that they could actually feel good to the actual player.
Yeah.
We could have given them just the base synergy of both. But the problem with that is that when you get to certain ones, it just felt really wrong, like it felt really wrong for mud to just be given the water and the earth.
Yeah.
That was like, because that's not really what mud is.
Yeah.
But it's something in that ballpark.
But it
right?
still gets
so
influenced by the rest of your team, which is really cool. And this is just a random question on top of that. Did this sort of affect the way you, like, what Illuvials you actually decided to build? Because, like, you don't want to have like 6 poison Illuvials in the game at launch and only like 1 steam, like, because of balance.
Yes.
So did you guys actually, like, have you guys actually worked out your ratios on your first, like, 150 that you've got, like, to sort of, and obviously classes are going to be a very similar thing again, which we won't go into, but the same sort of concept. But did you guys have to, like, just balance that all out at the very start to be like, we can't go too heavy on one combination?
So the way to balance it is utterly trivial, and I failed. I'll let you know straight up. It's very, very easy to say you need to have a certain amount of this and you have a certain amount of that. Otherwise, you can't build up these powerful double synergies, right? If we only gave you 1 poison character, then the thing that we didn't discuss is there's a poison threshold too. And when you have 2 poison characters, now you've got 2 stacks of poison. You get up to a new threshold, which changes.
You get the explode damage on the death and poisoning. Yep.
Yeah, and if you didn't have that ability, it would just be terrible, right?
Yep.
So there are other ways to get poison that I don't know if we've leaked yet, so I won't go into them in detail, but there's at least 2 other ways to add more poison beyond having poison characters in the game. But we wanted there to be 2 of everything. And we wanted there to be an even number of all the base ones. And we wanted there to be an even number that starts as, say, a fighter and become a berserker at stage 2.
Yeah.
And at stage 3, right? You can have your class upgrade at stage 2, or you could have your affinity upgrade, right? All of these things are really trivial, and I just stuffed it up. So what ended up happening is we got to the final amount of Illuvials, and I twisted around and contorted them and sort of failed. And then Ben had a go at it for that had to do with Illuvitars and getting the tiers correct. And we got all of that sort of done. But the problem with it was that we were a little bit lacking on one hybrid synergy that I won't go into, but effectively that's what spawned this need to have one more character in the game. So we've had to place an extra Illuvial into the game. It'll come a little bit later on. And that's another thing, is we're not launching every Illuvial at launch.
Yep.
We're launching them over time. So we've had to try to make it so that the ones that we give a nice variety of characters, but it's not going to be perfect until they're all there. Yep. Once we got the full set, then you'll be able to see how it goes. But our internal testing will include those characters well before you guys see them, because we don't need the artwork to test it inside of the combat engine.
Yeah,
we need 0. We can just have boxes that walk around. And so I think we're up to about maybe 70 or 80 Illuvials that we've got properly designed with the data file that determines how they work. And the first 10 took 6 months, and then it's
Speeds up.
progressively getting faster and faster and
Yep.
faster. So we'll add them in, but just don't expect at the game launch that it'll be like super amazing PvP because everything is perfectly balanced, because there'll literally be some Illuvials that no one will have access to.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? You won't be able to get them. So there'll be that extra thing where it's like, damn, if I had that, then I could have countered this guy in this match. And so there probably will be some meta comps. Once we get them all in there, I think that then meta comps will be a lot less prominent.
Yeah.
And it'll just be clever with how you play.
Yep. That's sick. And just from your standpoint with the game development stuff, you still think it's still looking good for end of March for release?
So we had a few issues with the private beta due to needing some extra infrastructure related to getting people into the game in a seamless way to be able to give us feedback that's worthwhile. We're not going to put out a beta that is very difficult for people to give feedback around.
Yep.
There's a couple of other issues on the back end that we have to work our way towards. As I mentioned in my last dev blog, the back end of our game has been probably the area that we've found it toughest to hire. These people are in really, really high demand, and we do things in a slightly different way than what everyone else does. So that means that you really need someone who can very quickly figure out, okay, this is the way that they do it, and fit into that system. You can't just grab someone off the shelf and just say, yep, they know exactly what we're doing in these systems. We have a lot of things that have very, very rarely been used at all, especially for games that we're using. So it'll depend on how that will flow on, whether or not we get through to March with the ability to launch the public beta. But the main issue with it at the moment is that it's delaying the private beta. So we wanted one to be launched by the end of this year, and it'll almost certainly be now in January. But there's all these different streams that are getting developed at their own pace, and some are more ahead than others. There's certain things like art comes before everything else because that's where we sort of started our pipeline. So with the game itself, you sort of need to build all of it.
Yeah.
And then the testing is about like fixing anything that's not quite working. Whereas with the art, it's a much more linear process.
Yeah.
So with the art, where we might be the same percentage of the way through it, but it doesn't matter because that means that you've got some things that are just perfectly done. They don't rely on anything else. So we could launch it with the art, no problems. We'll be putting out some videos probably towards the end of next week just to show some of the new attack sequences and some new battles that we've got in there. We'll probably show people a playthrough of what it looks like to do the survival mode, at least where we're at the moment. I know there's still some user interface stuff that needs to go in before we get it to the point where we're happy with it. But as far as March goes, it's always been something where whenever we're looking at the deadlines, it's always about if all the things go reasonably well for us. And there's been some things that have just been brilliant. We've been so lucky with that we've just got a great team. And there's other things where I'm not going to say that it's the fault of the people that are on the team. It's just that there's not enough of them in certain areas to be able to get it done real fast. But we've got other people that are just working their ass off to try and get it up to speed. So at this stage, I don't know, but we'll see where it goes in the long run. What we are committed to is what we launch should be something that people will like. And then after we launch, we'll take that feedback and we'll make it something that people love. And so no matter when it comes, this game will be good, or I'll be on I'll be on the floor dead from trying. Right? I promise you that. We'll keep on going until it's something that people are really, really happy with.
So at this stage, the goal is still Q1 end of March for launch, provided everything gets buttoned up and you can get it along the way.
Yeah. We've got a few recruiters that are working towards getting us the resources that we need. December is the hardest month to recruit in,
obviously,
but January is a little bit easier. And if everything works well, we can get that done. We don't technically need to launch with all of the systems in place,
Yeah.
but we're just a little bit cognizant of the idea of trying to hit a deadline and being
Not
undercooked.
not delivering the product. Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah. And so my passionate plea with everyone is just let us build something really good rather than let us build something really fast. But the deal that I'm making for everyone is if you guys are cool with that, we'll go as fast as we possibly can, right? That's our side of the bargain, is that
Yeah.
we're just going to try and get it done as quick as we can. I'm overseas at the moment, but that's so that my family can have a holiday. I'm not having a holiday. I worked about 10 hours yesterday and the day before, and I'll keep on working right through, except for maybe the 24th and the 25th. Other than that, I'll be working.
Yep.
A lot of the team are also working right the we're not slave drivers, and people are taking some breaks where they can, but one of the reasons why we're a little bit different to a lot of different protocols out there is because our developers have skin in the game. You know,
Yep.
they want to get this to be as good as possible because they own tokens,
Yeah.
and so
100%.
it's something that they feel passionate about. But also, they're the sort of people that just they're very proud people. They don't
Yeah.
want to see reviews of things be bad. I mean, we've got some super competitive people on this project. We've got an internal obstacle course that we use to work on the movement mechanics and to tweak them to get them to be really fluid, so that they're at the level of being able to be used in like speed running type things.
Yep.
I don't think we're quite there yet, but they are looking very good. And we have a leaderboard internally for who can complete the obstacle course the fastest. And they're really competitive about that, you know, and we've put a lot of people through it. And we'll get artists that'll come on board and they'll be competitive on it. And then the devs will be competitive and the marketing will be competitive on it. I've got some videos of it. I haven't shown it because I've been a little bit fearful that people look at it and go, well, like, this isn't the game that you're building. But I
Yeah.
think what people might, or what hopefully they might understand, is that sometimes to test all of these systems, you need to just build a very rough model that allows you to test everything really quickly
Yeah.
inside of one single space. And so we've got that there. We might put some video out of that. We'll definitely put it out at some stage, right? But it's
Yeah.
just a matter of working on the narrative. I believe that marketing might be a little bit less keen on me putting that out there because we're talking about very primitive shapes. It's not
Yeah.
inside of a region, but it's pretty fun. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Sick.
and I'm right. I think, although to be fair, I have an excuse. I hate making excuses, but I'm a left-hander, and we haven't set up our movement systems to be for lefties. So I'm sitting here doing this like weird little thing, whereas other people have a little bit of a go. But that's my excuse, and I'm
Yeah.
sticking to it.
Yeah, so you suck at it, basically. That's cool.
That's right. That's the one.
Sick. So the last thing that I want to cover off, because we've covered off the beta and the burning mechanics through the previous discussions, is the open world gameplay loop. Because you hit me up after my chat with Grant and said it might be a bit different from that. So I just wanted to get your take on how the open world, you go exploring, you got the singularities, how the whole portal thing, the encounter, how it all works.
So the way that it exists for this is a public beta, right? So when we launch as a public beta, we don't have the resources in the short time frame that we're talking about. Again, a lot of games get 4 to 6 years of development time. We're talking about we had development started in September or October. We switched to Unreal at the end of the year, and we had a very much smaller team, right? I would say you could put our starting date, considering our current size, as somewhere around about March or something like that. We obviously started before, but if we're talking about being a studio that has like 170 people now, we certainly didn't have that in March.
Yeah.
We were maybe 30 people. I can't remember the exact number, but it was significantly lower. So we don't have the ability to do what we want to long term. what we want to do long term is what you see in that small cinematic clip from the trailer
Yep.
of
With the
I
Titanal
believe
running
it's
through? Or are you,
that one too, but Singe.
yep.
So you see the whole between those two scenes, right?
Yep.
Titano, and then I believe it's Singe that is being chased
Yep.
by Len. If you have a look, he's sort of almost invisible,
Yep.
a bit like the
Cloaked.
Predator, right?
Yeah, cloaked, yeah.
Now, in a cinematic, you can sort of see that it's a rolling ball type character, and you can know what it is. Inside of the game, you wouldn't know what you're seeing.
Yep.
But then you can't really see it unless you look very closely. But she sort of taps her visor and sends out this
The shockwave
pulse
type
of
thing.
energy,
Yeah.
right? That reveals what it is,
Yep.
right? Now, part of our system is that we have scanning and then we have harvesting, mining, or capturing, right? These are for each of the things that you can do in our game. We've got plants, we've got rocks, and we've got alluvials, right? They all have scan, which is check out what it is, and that costs a bit of energy. And then there's get it, which costs a bit more energy, right? So the long-term plan is that you would have the alluvial wake, which is them cloaked in the world so you can't see exactly what it is. You might get a sense of its affinity or maybe of its class based on yeah. But once you see that, that doesn't tell you exactly what it is, right? Now you get two options, just like with mining and just with the harvesting. The option one is figure out what it is and then go in, and option two is YOLO it and go in straight away. The way that you would go in straight away is you get out your rifle. It's like got a quantum tracking dart with it, and you'd shoot it. It will go into the encounter realm, and then you can follow in after it. Right? But you won't know what's in.
You've just got to go in.
You go in, and it's hopefully it's not something too powerful for you. Hopefully it's not something that you've already got or that you're not interested in capturing. Right? The other option is to scan it so that you know what it is. And the way that would work is you would scan it using your visor. It sends out this pulse, which disrupts this thing. And it's, I'm trying not to.
You try not to give the law. Yeah, no, that's cool. I get it. I get. I'm looking at your brain ticking away, trying to think, how do I say this and not actually?
I want to. It reveals it. Let's just say that it reveals it, right? Gameplay mechanics, simple as that. It just reveals it. That thing would then exist inside of your region, and it would be there, and it would act like what those things do based on the bios that we've got. It would fly away or roll away or try to run somewhere. It would jump down a cliff, and all of that takes a lot of time to make the nav meshes, to do a lot more animations, to really tweak the inverse kinematics for every character. We have inverse kinematics for the humanoid characters because they're always out in the world, so we need to make sure that they look good. By the way, they've gotten quite a bit better since the trailer, so now like when you walk up steps, it's very
smooth.
It's very good. We're looking, we might not have it by the starter beta, but there's things like vaulting. We might even include things like ledge grabs and stuff like that. Cool. So there's a lot that we can add to make it better, and which we definitely will add time. It's just a matter of when we can get it done. But each of those characters needs a lot of love to get right, and effectively there's two skeletons in the game. There's the male and the female, no matter whether someone that's a bit bigger or skinnier or taller or whatever. So that's all taken care of in a very efficient way because there's just two of them to deal with, and they're almost identical anyway. On the alluvial side, you've got Squiz, who is a squid, right? You've got an anteater. You've got my favorite alluvial, which you don't know what it is. You've got Titanor. You've got all of these. You've got all of these different things. That we've also got the alluvial that's based on Shia LaBeouf, which you won't know what that means until you see it, and then as soon as you go, oh my god, that's Shia LaBeouf. So
Oh
we've
my
got one.
God.
It's the most degenerate alluvial that we've ever put into the game. There is no way that you could think of something as shameful as what we have put in. There's going to be a big divide in the community when they see this alluvial. They'll go, that's not right. You guys should be ashamed of yourself. And then there's other people that'll say,
That's brilliant.
yeah, go nuts. That's
Yeah.
brilliant. It's brilliant. So I'm on the side of, I think it's brilliant, but I can definitely see people's opinions going the other way, and possibly heavily,
Yeah.
right? But in any case, there's all these different skeletal meshes that these characters have that we would need to go, and it'd be a lot of work to get that done.
Yeah.
So to start off with, we have the current system. So that's the long-term system, which
That's
is
the
that
dream.
they
Yep.
won't just, when you go into the world, you won't see any of them unless you scan them.
Yep.
And I think that's the difference between the way that Grant explained it and the way that I would explain it. Is you don't go into the world and just instantly see everything, because if you did that, it would take away the strategy of scanning things.
Yeah.
Right. So the world will look identical to the way that it is now in the
Yep.
way that you do it. The difference will be in how you find out what's in each of the things. So the idea will be you shoot the encounters, and that will create the singularity, and that singularity is effectively your pathway to go where the alluvial goes.
So yeah,
right?
you've got the bubbles essentially, which are the singularities, and you can
the weird wobbly bubble that's sort of like that you could see at the start, that's see-through, and it has sort of like heat effects coming off of it. That is the wake of the alluvial, right? It's not swimming through water, but let's just say it's swimming, right? And so you've got that, and that is not any particular thing. It's just showing you that something is there. And then when you shoot that dart is sort of piercing through, hitting the actual alluvial behind it, and pissing it off, right? And then it goes, nope, I don't want to be here anymore, and it runs away. When it runs away, what it's doing is it's creating, the alluvial itself is creating the singularity, right?
Okay.
And that singularity that it creates is its way of saying, I'm gone, right? And it's going somewhere else. And so then if you've hit it, you can follow in after it. If you shoot and you miss it, but it goes close enough that it notices that someone's doing stuff with it, or even if you just walk within a certain range of it, it'll just go, nope. It'll go into the singularity, but it'll close. Okay. The point of the quantum tracker is that it keeps it open. And in the public beta version of the game is you take that singularity and then you scan that.
Yeah.
Right? And that will tell you what's in there. And you can either jump in or you can scan it beforehand. So, it's effectively all the same functionality.
Yeah. So effectively what I'm getting at, you're going to see like these bubbles in the, like when you're in the open world, you shoot them.
Yep.
It basically makes a port. We'll call it a portal sort of thing.
Yep.
And then you can scan that portal and choose to go in, because then you'll know, or you can just jump into the portal and just see what you get. So that's going to be,
and you might choose to scan it, see that it's something that you're not interested in, and away you go, right? And you just don't go into that encounter because you have a finite that energy, right? And so that's so in terms of the actual gameplay, it's all the same thing from that strategy point of view, that acquiring of loot, because that's really fundamental to the way that our economy functions and all these sort of things. We want there to be these choices that people make, but the gamification of it is how fun can we make it to open a pack of cards? And having a beautiful world is the first step to that. Giving you the ability to jump around, find crazy areas, that's the second step. The third step is you got to get out there and like be 360 no scoping these things, and that gives you a little bit of extra fun as well. But the final step of that, or maybe 4 out of 5, is allowing them to exist in the world with you, right? The final step would be we should be adding in a little bit more in the way of a larger world with puzzles, possibly adding the ability to bring an alluvial in there with just walks around with you and can act as a like a mount for you and stuff like that. That could be something that we could throw in there. The only problem is that you're a very technologically advanced race of Valain, so
Yeah.
therefore having mounts is cool, but we would have to make them pretty epic
Yeah.
because I mean, if you're sitting there riding on your Atlas when you've got a jetpack that can take you across, it's probably not going to cut it, you know? And
Yeah,
it's
I
probably
just
going to
had
turn
that
around and
picture.
bite you.
Yeah, no, 100%. But
So
I was thinking you could even get into cool things like having like maybe obstacles, like maybe there's like a tree in your way and you got to burn it down. Like, you know what I mean? You could have like cool
yeah,
like things like that in the future.
yeah,
Of
yeah.
you need the Illuvials to assist you in the open world to get to where you're trying to get to.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I think that was just a phenomenal game. And with 6 or 7 years of incubation time, this is what you can achieve, right? You can get the ability to chop down a tree, stasis it, whack it with an axe, jump on it, and ride it off to a castle and all sorts of things, right? We can do these things too, but we have to hit our core things.
Yeah.
And Zelda never had to worry about the blockchain or anything like that. So there's a lot of things that we would just really love to do. We just don't want to promise you that you're going to walk into the world and all of a sudden it's going to have all of this crazy stuff because it won't at launch.
Yeah.
It'll be it's our compromise between having the beautiful world that everybody would love to eventually have
Yeah.
and just
And having a product.
selling you packs of cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could just sell you packs of cards, and for your travel fee, you just get this amount of stuff, and there's 8 rocks and 2 alluvials and 3 plants, and that's what you get. And you might like that. I mean, I didn't think that I would like Pokemon, but when I started to open up packs of Pokemon cards, it does get a little bit addictive to do it.
100%.
So there is a bit of fun in there, but there's just a limit to what we can do inside of the time frames. So that's the reason why the open world is the way that it is, and it will become bigger and badder over time. The overworld itself will evolve into a new game eventually, where there'll be a different way to acquire alluvials, because we think that that will be the best way going forward. The Illuvium Zero game into its own proper game over time, which will be esports focused and very cool. But there's a path.
Yeah.
And we can't do everything at once. So we have to just
One
do
step
it one step at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why I say that I don't think that I get to take a break for probably. I don't think that I'll be able to take a break in 2022, because the second that the game launches as the public beta, there'll be people who say, but why don't we have mounts? Why don't we have the characters running around the world with us? And why can't I tweak every little detail about my face and stuff like this? And we'll have to put them in, because we don't want people to not have what they want, but that'll just mean going through there. And I'll monitor myself. I've said to my brothers at various stages that it could be that I need to take a rest at some stage, but I'm pretty good at monitoring myself, and I haven't got to that point yet. So I'm just going to keep going until it happens, because it's fun to work on it. You know, like
100%.
I know I have a lot of meetings that I have to do to make sure that everyone sort of has the information that they need. But it's really fun to go in there and speak to the back end team about what they're doing and try to help them understand how can they synergize better with our web team. You know, I find those challenges rewarding, so I'll just keep doing them, and it'll continue to feel like not work.
Yeah, 100%, dude, 100%. And the last thing that I do want to ask, because we just touched on it, is the open beta. How long do you expect it to be in the open beta phase before you go full blown and go, okay, this is our official game release, do the full official marketing campaign, all that's like, obviously you can't know 100%, but like in your mind, what are you thinking? Like maybe 6 months, 12 months, 3 months? What's your sort of gauge on
the
that?
The original plan was to be in there for at least 6 months.
Yep.
But a short an amount of time after that as is humanly possible to get the features. What we don't want to do is have feature scope creep up and up and up to the point where we never get out of there, I think that there's a point at which we can make it be considered complete.
Yep.
And I think for us, it's really important to do that because we need to work out how the game will interface with any other games that we build. And without having it be feature complete, it's very tough to work out what's the interplay between the two titles. So we don't want to add in too many extra things. Some of the things that we want to add in, like probably the biggest one off the top of my head that I want to add in is having the Illuvials in the overworld once you scan them.
Yeah.
But we don't want it to be like some weird MMA game where the physics of the character's leg goes over its head and goes inside out and it's gone, and so there's going to be a lot of development associated with that because the worlds are not flat, right? There's cliffs, and we need to make sure, like, what happens if Atlas just walks off the cliff, right? Like, I mean, he needs to have enough intelligence, and he's a lovable idiot, but we don't want him to be that much idiot that he's just a lemming falling over the edge, you know?
So you don't want him to be a lovable memory. Yeah.
Exactly. He'd probably be okay. He's got his hydro barrier. He'd probably just hit the ground and just like diving into a pool of water. Like, that's probably the biggest one in terms of the amount of man hours that's going to go into getting it done.
Yeah.
But there's other things that we will do as well to make all of the different systems work better than what they do. And it'll probably include expanding out the regions, building up the regions. We do want to feel alive.
Yeah.
We want you to be able to log in a month from launch and see, oh, wow, there's a town starting to build, right? And then, you know,
cool.
we don't launch with anything besides the adventure mode and the survival mode because that'll be built. But the adventure mode is something that allows you to collect everything. And on day one, no one will have any characters, so it'd be a bit weird to put them into a ranked battle.
Yeah.
So we will have a certain cutoff before rank starts. That may be 2 weeks, a month. I'm not 100% sure. Once that is done, we need to start doing things like actually building out the Leviathan arena, right?
Yeah.
The Leviathan arena is built out of the spaceship.
Yeah.
And it's going to be just a massive amount of work to get that looking epic. And, you know, like you're talking about building it into the hull of this crashed ship, and you've got to see all of the cleared out stuff. There's a lot of work that goes into that from a design perspective, which I'm glad I don't have to go into too much detail with that I'll leave the artist to do that. But I think the point is to just get as much done as we can to make people feel like, yep, this proper AAA quality title. It's got all of the bugs fixed. It's got all of the little details ironed out, because we don't plan on doing the competitive game modes with big money on the line until we get it right.
Yeah, 100%.
So we'll have a bunch of tournaments that go around on a tour, and that will be how you qualify for the world title.
Yeah.
And that world title, will be something that there'll be a lot of pro players in there. They want to get hands on some of that money. So we need that to be like a really solid environment. But I think that the combat engine shouldn't take a whole bunch of time to get right.
Yeah.
It's more the art assets of getting all of the characters integrated into the game. It's more about building out the overworld. So I'd say there's a lot of art that goes with it, which is kind of frustrating because at the start, the thing that lags behind is the dev, because nothing works until everything works.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas with the art, you build one, you make one thing, it's there, it's done, it's job done, you keep on going. So by the time we get all of the dev stuff complete, then we'll have to wait on the art stuff to catch up to it, and it'll be just a complete flip of the way that it is now.
Yeah. Nice, dude. Just that whole idea of like the qualifying rounds and stuff. Like I've said before, I did competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, and like going to like going to places and doing like, you know, you start off with local tournaments, then you go to like regionals and then nationals, and like that type of thing. I just like, that really gets me excited. So I can't wait for it, dude. I do notice that at the start of this interview, you had the sun just glaring in your face. Now it's pitch black over there by the looks of it. So I think we've gone for about 2 hours here.
I'm quite north, so I mean, the sun sets very early here, by the way, so
That's all right.
it's not abnormal. But I know that it's very late for you.
2 a.m. over
What
here.
Are we at?
Yeah, 2 a.m.
2 a.m. Yeah. You're an absolute warrior.
we'll call it there, but dude, really appreciate you coming on. Like I was actually coming into this, I'm like, will we have enough stuff to talk about to get a real good interview? And I think we smashed it out with plenty of talk. So I really appreciate it, man. Looking forward to the launch.
No problem.
Looking forward to the new year and getting stuck into it. So really appreciate it, dude.
Thanks for bringing me on. You'll have to get me back in. I don't do enough AMAs at the moment, but I'd really like to make sure that we're connecting the fan base, and the best way we can do that is through guys such as yourself that are doing just a fantastic job. So really appreciate you having me on, and I'll be back next time you need me.
Too easy. Thanks, dude. Anyway, guys, that finally is the end of this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and we'll look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.